Anyway, again, thanks everyone for joining. This is going to hopefully be a very informative session for you. We're going to be going through this. We're going to be touching on all the different things that Microsoft has released technology-wise across their stack. Now, there's a lot of releases. This isn't going to be a comprehensive list, but it is going to be, we're going to touch on the areas that we feel like are most important. We want to make sure all of our customers and potential customers know and understand. So at the end of this meeting, we will have a short survey, just 3 questions we ask that each of you fill out. That survey will allow you to be able to identify if there's any one specific thing we cover that, hey, I want more information about that functionality. That'll be the perfect time to share with that. So without further ado, I know that we have a few customers that or a few people that are on this call that are kind of new to JourneyTEAM. So by way of just a brief introduction to us as a company, we've been around for 25 years. We are a Microsoft Gold partner as well as an Okta partner. We are a managed Microsoft partner, meaning we're one of the go-to in our area. We also have been named one of the top places to work in Utah. So we've been doing this for a while. We've got a lot of great people. On your screen right now, you should be seeing a list of the presenters we're going to have. Again, my name is Mark Mickelson. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Eric Roth, who will be kicking things off.
Fabulous. Okay, so we're going to quickly hit some different components. The agenda here, I'm going to cover cloud, and then we're going to hand it off to different team members here that was mentioned. So, and we're going to kind of jump around a little bit here as we go through each of these various sections of Microsoft's technology. So to start out with, on the cloud side, Azure Active Directory session lifetimes. The short version here is they're changing. Wait a little bit longer. Okay, I pulled a screenshot right out of Microsoft's documentation here. If you've ever wanted to tweak the session lifetimes for single sign-on or how long your session is good for a security standpoint, Microsoft has had this functionality for a couple years in preview. They've learned a ton, and long story short, it's all changing, and they will be rolling it all into conditional access policies. And so I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that this was a big roadmap that's changing. The intent that Microsoft has is that when you get prompted for multi-factor authentication, for example, that they don't prompt you to death, and they don't want users to make people get lots of MFA prompts. Their research has shown that's much more insecure than a single MFA prompt when it's appropriate and needed. And now that device is known as having passed MFA, and that all goes into session lifetimes. So that's a quick overview on session lifetimes. If you've got more questions about that or needed details, that's the top of the iceberg, not even the tip, right? And there's a lot more behind that discussion, but that's a piece of that piece. So let's jump over to, I believe, Kip, who's going to talk about some Teams update.
Sounds good. All right, so a couple bulleted items first is Teams. When you install Office 365 Pro Plus, Microsoft Teams will now be included as part of that install with the standard Office products. Yeah, that's fine. It will be installed as part of the Office products, so keep that in mind, and that will allow you to have Intune support as part of deploying Microsoft Teams. And then there's some handful of Teams features that I just kind of wanted to point out and kind of show you guys what's now available in Microsoft Teams. Like Rob mentioned earlier, this isn't the full list, right? These are kind of key things that we think is valuable. So one of the first ones is our ability to actually show Teams. Am I sharing my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Is the ability to show SharePoint lists from within the Teams client. So as I created a new tab, I selected SharePoint. And then once the SharePoint loads, I see the individual pages that I can expose within Teams. And now I can select a given list and expose a SharePoint list within the Teams application. Within the Teams application, I have the ability to filter, add, and modify list items from within the Teams client. really cool stuff. We've been waiting for a while for this functionality, and finally now we're being able to expose lists within Teams as well as SharePoint pages. Another item that I want to point out is voice recordings. So in the event that you do not want to type within a thread, we now have the ability to, in a threaded conversation on your mobile device, select, you'll notice two different mics. You have the mic for your keyboard on your mobile phone, and then there's another mic on your mobile phone within the Teams application. When you press and hold down that mic, you can actually record your conversation, keep holding, release, and then it will save a WAV file that can then be listened to within the Teams app by other members within your team. The fourth option, or the fourth thing I wanted to point out, is what we call a call transfer or consult. So during a phone conversation, I have the ability, so in this example, I have the ability to go to a team member, and we'll see if we can distract someone that's probably not working, such as Rhett. He never works. So I could call Rhett on Teams. I'll dial a phone conversation. Let's see if he picks up. I'll stay muted. Oh man. See, maybe he is actually working. That's rare. Let me find someone else. All right, let me call another team member here. Give me 1 second. This is worth it. This is really great stuff. So Eric finds. So let me just start a threaded conversation with you, Eric.
We didn't say anything bad about it.
Yeah. Well, you're often inappropriate, so I probably shouldn't have used you as an example. So I can make a phone call to Eric Fines here. He'll pick up. And what I can do, the idea around this consulting is I can be having a phone conversation with someone, and then I can use this menu here and consult, then transfer, which allows me then to call another individual within the organization. It places my current call with Eric on hold, and I can communicate with someone else on the team. And at that point, once he's on hold and I'm having the conversation with someone else, I can then choose to transfer, and it will dial who I'm transferring to, and then Eric will have his phone conversation with someone else. So pretty slick stuff. And then lastly on Teams, the other thing that we wanted to show is screen sharing. So you'll notice here, now we have an additional icon in the top right-hand corner of my threaded conversation with Eric Vines, and I can choose to share my screen with Eric Vines without starting a phone call. Before we were forced to actually start a phone conversation and then share. Now we could just share instantly without dialing any audio. And that's all that we have, at least for this month or this quarter on Teams.
Okay, so I'm Eric Vines. We're going to talk a little bit about the new features within Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement and how it is being extended to the artificial intelligence platform. There's 3 areas that Microsoft has released AI around metrics on, those being sales insights, customer service insights, and then market insights, which was formerly known as Microsoft Social Engagement or social media listening. Right now, the effort around that AI, as well as some of the AI that's been previously embedded into the tool, has been one of the big drivers around automating a lot of the normal tasks that go into managing your pipeline. So I want to talk about how some of that technology is leveraged, give you guys a couple other updates of some of the things that are coming, and then do a shameless plug for what both Eric and Kip have previously talked about of how Office 365 is integrated, and then also tee it up for how Power BI is becoming more and more leveraged and embedded into the platform. Here you can see an example of the AI insights. This is made and pre-built by Microsoft. It is currently in preview, but based on the data in your system, it will automatically not only produce metrics, but identify trends that are happening within your records. This is an example of customer service, and so as you can see, there are different menu options on the left, but as you go through this, It's going to identify top volume drivers, emerging topics based on the descriptions and case titles that are given, as well as provide standard contact center statistics around the channel, average completion, average resolution, and CSAT if you've enabled voice of the customer. Those are again available in sales, customer service, and then market insights, which is going to let you know how social media trends are happening against your various companies' presences in those different channels. In the bottom right, I've got the unified UI. This is where both the app within the web version and the app on the mobile operate on the same platform. So as you work through a record, and in this example, we have a lead and the business process flow at the top of that, it's built once, it's deployed once, and you can now even use things like Flow and PowerApps to launch those various activities even in the mobile device. You can also embed Power BI into the mobile device the same way as if you were to open up the Power BI app, you can access that within the Dynamics 365 app as well. And then up top, we have a wonderful picture of someone with some Microsoft HoloLens glasses on, where they are in an augmented reality looking at equipment. And here they've got a remote assist call where information from both Dynamics and their office environment has allowed them to call another team member, and that team member is able to walk them through the maintenance and care of equipment. So this would be the example of you have a new tech, it's their first week on the job, they put on the HoloLens, they're looking at the equipment, they call the senior tech or the person that is very familiar with this, and that person is able to guide them through and even draw things on the screen to point them to where they're able to work on that equipment. The results of that visit can then be captured into Dynamics 365, where that equipment maintenance has been logged. This is a very common example of how Microsoft is using new technology combined with their platform and other components of it, like Teams and Office 365, to be able to allow team members to communicate more effectively. Back to you, Kip.
All right. So we're going to go a little bit more demo on some things regarding SharePoint. So first off, I'm making a lot of assumptions. So if you guys do not know what modern communication sites are, you're living in a cave or you haven't met with me recently. So if that is the case, certainly reach out and I'll give you all the information that you need. Can you give me sharing again? And let's talk about communication sites specifically. 1 second. So first off, modern communication sites, they are superior to the standard classic. One of the updates from Microsoft is finally we can run PowerShell scripts and change the root site to SharePoint to be a communication site. There is now a Microsoft supported way of doing this. Some of our clients know that we've created our own way. So Microsoft has joined us on the wagon of converting root sites to communication sites, and that is now available. What's also available in the modern administrative area is we can now associate sites as hub sites through the UI, and I can or create a hub site through the UI and associate other site collections to that hub site through the administrative panel. We used to have to use PowerShell for this. We can now do it from within the administrative space. Now, as a quick plug, I want to make sure that you guys are all thinking of hub sites as not just for an intranet for collaboration and global navigation across an intranet, but also think of it as global navigation around collaboration sites, around projects, around workspaces and communities. There's a lot of usage for hub sites far and beyond just the concept around intranets. Other updates that have been made available to us is the change the look update. So this is really fun stuff. So you'll notice here if I go to the gear and I click on change the look, with this latest update from Microsoft, I can adjust my theme from this panel. I can change the header to be a compact version, or which just really kind of shortens everything, or a standard version. And then I can apply a unique background to the header area based upon the theme that has been applied. I can then go to the navigation, and I can use a standard cascading nav that will actually go 3 levels deep, or implement a mega menu navigation as well. So as you can see, as I mouse over Employee Central, we see the mega menu functionality that's now available through the UI. And then the last setting within here is the footer, which we can make visible, modify the color, have some text, or actually not and, have text or an image that is placed within the footer as well, and have footer links associated within the footer. So that's the update on the change the look. Another change is page templates. So from this home page, if I click on New and I click on Page, you'll see that now I can select page templates as part of the page creation process. There's actually only 3 currently, but I'm assuming this is just kind of coming down the pipe where we'll eventually have even more templates that will be available to us. Another thing that's available to us is authoritative news. I'm not going to be able to demo that, but imagine that you have multiple sites that have news that rolls up to a given hub site. I can make one of those sites be authoritative in its news source. And so that news always takes precedence over other news within the group of hub sites. So pretty slick stuff. Another item is news order. So if you'll notice here, I have the news web part on the home page. If I edit the page and go into the web part properties for the news, you'll see here that I now have this little organized panel on the right-hand side. So imagine that some news articles, even though maybe my test news is the latest, maybe it's still not more important than a previous news article. So I can grab a previous news article, drag it over to the right, and put it to the very top. And what that does is, regardless of new news coming into the site, that news article will remain at the very top at all times. This allows us to control kind of what users are seeing on a more regular basis. If I click away here, if you'll see in the background there, you'll see now that that news article that I dragged to the very top will remain at the top until I decide otherwise. Okay? And then a few updates on lists. So first off, if you haven't played with conditional column formatting, it is a little bit scripty. Maybe a power user, not your standard end user, will have the ability to do this. But you'll see here that I've added conditional formatting to the choice column, where the shade of that background of that column changes based upon the values within there. So imagine a list that's tracking a rating of a project retrospective or employee ratings, and you want to create a quasi-graphical interface with conditional color formatting. And then within the list as well, we now have dragging of columns. So I can change the location of a column by simply clicking and dragging it and adjusting the format of how my list displays. And that is it on the SharePoint side.
All right. Power BI is up next. If you've never heard of Power BI, it is an awesome tool for making reports and dashboards. You can literally connect to hundreds of different data sources, whether it's on-premise or in the cloud. It's a great way to take your data, mash it up, do your extract, transform, and load all in the same place, and then make reports based off of those data sets. We're going to do a very quick demo of just what a Power BI dashboard, or report rather, looks like. And okay, cool. So here is just a quick report. So technical difficulties. Okay, so quick report here. If you were to click on something like the baby boomers right here, you can filter the page based off of the selections you make. And if we come up here to USA and then filter on this as well, you can get a different picture of what's going on underneath your data, very quickly filtering as you click around. If we come back to baby boomers and right click, we'll be able to drill down into this. And you can do this in all of your Power BI reports as you set them up. Making these drill down features is fairly simple, and allows you to help your users navigate through the data in the most interesting way possible, as well as hopefully getting them to the point where they can make sense of their data quickly. Some of the updates that have come to Power BI in the last little while are that you can now deploy your Power BI environment in France and Korea. Not that most of you are there, but you can do it. You've also got a new Power BI paginated report builder for those of you using the premium workspaces. This would allow you to make paginated reports or pixel perfect reports, much like you did in SSRS or SQL Server Management or reporting services, and then run them in Power BI Premium. Additionally, the new workspace experience has gone GA or general availability, and you can still revert back to the old method, but most of the time you'll want to stick with this new Power BI workspace experience. It's significantly better and allows you to manage your groups better there as well. Lastly, Power BI and data flows are awesome. If you don't know about these, you really should. So in Power BI, the service online, you can create a data set, do your extract, transform, load, all your ETL work in the web browser, and then create a data set that you can then use over and over again in Power BI reports or PowerApps, flows. And if you want, you can even dump it to your own Azure Data Lake instance and consume it there in whatever format or for whatever other reason you might want to use that data set. So pretty cool stuff going on in the data flows world. You can even use one data flow to feed another data flow and multiple to feed into another. So imagine your ETL work happening in the cloud for the first time. Pretty cool stuff. So that is Power BI update. Next up, we've got Eric Roth, who's going to talk about Exchange Online.
Awesome. Okay. So Exchange Online, as of August 1st, 2017, if your Office 365 tenant was built prior to August 1st of 2017, then it already has this feature called Modern Authentication enabled for Exchange and Skype for Business. If your tenant is older than that and you haven't worked with us, there's a good chance that you do not have Modern Authentication enabled on Exchange and Skype for Business in your tenant. So what are we talking about when we say Modern Authentication? In short, it's a authentication flow or process that understands additional ways of authenticating, such as multi-factor authentication, when I get a push notification, or I'm coming from a trusted device, so I don't need a second factor relative to MFA because my device is acting as that factor. Okay, all of those kind of things are supported with Modern Authentication. Things that don't support Modern Authentication are, in general, think old stuff. So we're talking old versions of Office, like Office 2010. If you are on Office 2010 and you're using Office 365 services, you cannot do Modern Authentication. If you're using Office 2013 and you're interacting with Office 365, you can do Modern Authentication, but you must touch the desktop or the workstation and enable it through some registry keys. Okay. So what Microsoft is doing is they are going to be, quote, soon. My favorite word with Microsoft is soon. I can't tell you when, but soon. They will be enabling all Office 365 tenants that are not federated, and I'll explain what that means, to turn on Modern Authentication. I've got a couple of screenshots here of what the authentication looks like, therefore, when you're using Modern or legacy authentication. The new screenshot in the front looks like a little mini browser interface. It's got the logo. That should be your company logo. If your website or if your Office 365 tenant is not branded, we should talk. And you get a authentication. The old legacy authentication is what that box in the behind that looks like, where you kind of get a little pop-out authentication and you have to type username and password, and it has no clue what device authentication is or what multi-factor authentication is. It's classic basic authentication. Okay, so this will affect Office 2010 and 2013 clients. I mentioned that. If your tenant is federated, what we mean by that is that when you go log into Office 365, you get sent away to another authentication service. The most common use case there is Active Directory Federation Services, ADFS. If your company, and anyone on the planet can figure this out, you open like a private or incognito browser, go to portal.office.com, type in blah, blah, blah at company.com, your company's name, domain name, and see what happens. If you get said redirecting to your identity provider or external authentication, you're using, quote, federated authentication. So if you're doing federated auth, this won't be turned on for you. But if you're not using password hash or pass-through authentication, you will be getting modern authentication enabled soon with Exchange and Skype for Business. And that will affect the end user's experience with how they interact with Exchange Online and Skype for Business Online. For what it's worth, that's already enabled by default for SharePoint Online. That's been there for many years, so you don't have to worry about that piece. But those are the two big ones that are now, Microsoft is going to be flipping the switch for you. Okay, so that's an update on what is coming soon in that context. So with that, let's go back to Dynamics and Eric Vines.
George. Sorry, this is George Sagan, ERP Director, and the big news this quarter is the April release of Business Central. Way too many details to go down the list, but everybody who's either using it now or in the middle of deploying it, certainly all the consultants are really excited about all the new navigation enhancements to the help menus, feature enhancements. I say that the main message here is that Microsoft is listening to the end users. We had about 1,000 ideas submitted on the experience.dynamics.com on the idea board. Of those, already 12% of them have actually been deployed in this release. We got another, actually about 13%, another 12% are in the hopper to get put into the next release. They're already approved and being developed, and a bunch more under review, and more coming in all the time. So we're really excited to hear, as we are submitting these ideas to Microsoft, that they're pushing them into the new release. So those releases are coming out over the next week. Just get on your tenant, schedule your upgrade, and it'll happen. The next exciting thing is more internal to JourneyTEAM, but it's regarding our customers who are on GP. And we've got an exciting program for them. We basically have GP customers in kind of 3 different states. There are those who are on an older version of GP, but it's working great for them. They're really happy and excited about it. We have plans to help take care of you. A lot of our customers over the last few years have been hit with ransomware attacks because they're on very old versions of the software OS and the database engine, and they're just vulnerable. So we have plans to help you get your GP instance migrated up to the cloud, to the Azure cloud, where we can protect it better. We can also help you with our cloud services team get better security if you want to stay on premises. The second plan is for those who want to upgrade their GP. The main thing that keeps our customers from upgrading is it can be really expensive if you're on an older version and you want to get to a newer version. You essentially have to upgrade your OS and your database in several different hops, and you also have to upgrade your hardware to be compatible with those database and server OS versions as you go. And it's just more resources than any company has in-house. We've made it simple and painless. We've created virtual Azure machines where we can put your Dynamics GP instance into the instance that's compatible with what you're on, and then perform the upgrade as far as it will go on that instance, and then we simply move it to the next instance, do the upgrades that are possible in that version, and we keep hopping you through those versions until we get you all the way up to the most current version of GP, or whatever version you want to get to, without having to do any of those interim server hardware and OS and database upgrades. So we make that nice and painless for you. The final scenario is those people who want to take GP and actually get off of it and get onto Dynamics Business Central, which is Microsoft's kind of flagship product right now for the middle tier ERP market. And by upgrading you to the most current version of GP, we then have an intelligent cloud solution that we can use to take your data, much of your setup data and configuration data, and just push it straight into GP or Business Central in the cloud and have a much faster migration experience. So with that, I guess we're back to Eric Roth.
Fabulous, awesome. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, Azure Active Directory, multi-factor authentication, and self-service password reset. Okay. If you're not using multi-factor authentication and you have data in the cloud, you will likely be compromised, is what I would say. Okay. And so what the background here is self-service password reset. It gives you the ability to have users reset their forgotten passwords in a secure method natively built into Office 365. Okay, that is what they're calling their, and they've recently enhanced and upgraded this experience. So let me tell you the backdrop here and why you should care about this. Historically, if you had users that you wanted to get enabled for self-service password reset, that was a whole separate enrollment and registration experience, right? And you had different methods and factors that you could have them set up with, such as like secret questions, a phone call, a phone call to their, or an email, excuse me, an email with a secure code in that, right? That's what you could use to do self-service password reset. Then, of course, Microsoft had their multi-factor authentication story. And if you were doing multi-factor, there was an enrollment process for multi-factor. And it was totally a separate flow, separate questions, separate options than you got with self-service password reset, and vice versa. So Microsoft has allowed you to converge that enrollment experience together. So now whether you are being prompted to enroll in multi-factor, or whether you're being prompted to enroll in self-service password reset, you have a common, consistent, quote, converged user experience there. They recently enhanced this version. And so in your tenant, let me, if you go, let me just share my screen here real quick. And let's go here. Ooh, you know what? I'm not able to share. Here we go, share my screen. Okay, so in Azure Active Directory, this is just a demo environment that I've got. If I go into here and I look at user settings, down here under this access panel, manage settings for access panel preview features, this is the hidden door to where you turn this converged experience on. And it's users can use preview features for registering and maintaining security information. So what does Microsoft call this if they have both SSPR and MFA merged together? They're calling it your security information. Okay, makes sense, right? That applies to SSPR, it applies to MFA, etc. And this is the enhanced view. Some of you that have older Office 365 tenants will see two options here: the initial version of this and then the new enhanced version. It's the exact same concept. It's just they've updated the user experience, so they're calling it enhanced. This tenant is new enough that it didn't have the initial preview functionality of that. You can turn it on for everyone, selected users or groups, or none. Okay. By doing the enhanced version, you have a much cleaner experience. Okay. And so, for example, if I go to AKA, let me make sure, .ms/MFA setup. This is a quick little way. If you don't have this inferior experience, it's like, hey, I need more information. And this is going to walk me through the new converged enhanced experience to get MFA enrollment set up. If you don't recognize this, because this is the new enhanced experience, and it's very simple. It's 10 times better than the old MFA enrollment / SSPR enrollment experience. Okay, and it guides the user through it, and it actually guides the user to use the most secure method. The old method, the user had to pick which one they should use, and they had to know what they all were. This guides you right through using the app, which is the most secure method for this functionality. Okay, and so it tells you, hey, go get the Microsoft Authenticator app. Once you've got that, go allow notifications and then add an account, work or school. Great. Now point your phone at the screen. It's going to give you the QR code. Scan this with the QR code, et cetera, et cetera. It just walks you right through that. Okay. The same thing applies if you're enrolling someone in self-service password reset. So that's, I didn't change anything there. That's over here in the password reset, right? If users can do self-service password reset in our authentication methods, we can now support the Microsoft Authenticator app with like push notifications to use that to reset your password. And you're enrolled and it's all converged and it's a great story now, okay? You can turn on these various methods, all this kind of stuff. I would not recommend security questions. I'm not a fan of them. Anyway, okay, so that's SSPR, converged multi-factor authentication, and why you should care about it and why you should use it. Once again, if you're not doing multi-factor authentication, you definitely want to get that enrolled. And before enrolling that for everyone, I would highly recommend using the converged experience that is in preview right now. Okay, so what's next? If I go back to the slide deck here, let me just stop sharing here. Right, and we've got the, are you sharing there? Okay, great, thank you guys. Okay, so sign-in logs, this is super important. Everything in Office 365 and Azure AD has fantastic auditing and logging built into it. And so there's a super important thing that you should understand about troubleshooting and getting visibility into what's going on with your Office 365 environment. So I'm going to share my screen again here. And what we're going to do here is in Azure Active Directory, once again, I'm just at portal.azure.com, and I then went and drilled into the Azure Active Directory blade, and here we are, right? Show my screen. Am I not sharing? There we go. Okay. So inside here, if you can go to the sign-in logs here. Okay, there's another way to get to this. If you go to users and look up an existing user, I'll just randomly pick someone here. You can then look at the user sign-in logs for that specific user. It's like a filtered view for that specific user. Okay, I'm going to go back to Azure Active Directory, go to my sign-in logs here. By default, you only get a few columns. You get these columns right here. Okay, the date, the user, the application, and the status. Okay, and you can filter on these things here, but one of the most valuable things that you should be doing is go into the columns options here and then enable these additional columns. The IP address that the user used to log in, the client app that was used, the operating system, the browser, the location, that's the named location that they've correlated based off the IP address. Correlation ID, I'll get into that method, and then what MFA methods they ended up doing, the detail, and the results of that. So I'm going to enable all of those columns, okay? Now I get a bunch more options up here that I can use for filtering. Okay, so you know how we talked about legacy protocols and that Exchange Online was going to get modern authentication turned on for you if you haven't turned that on? It might be really helpful for you to know who's using these old legacy protocols and who's going to be affected. This is your answer to how to figure that out. You go into the sign-in logs, and logs never lie, right? And you add the where is it? The client app, and look at these available client apps here. Okay, if I want to see who's using IMAP or POP, or who's authenticating with SMTP to relay mail, or these older clients like older Office clients. So this is going to tag my Office 2010 stuff, right? I can easily just select that and say, show me logins for the last month. If you don't see the last month here, that's because you're not using Azure AD Premium. We should talk. And hit apply, right? And I've got one account that's been signed in here. It came from this IP address coming out of San Jose, California, and the date and time and what, I mean, this is great, right? I can see exactly what's going on here. If I want to look at who's using IMAP, right? Simple stuff here, okay? No IMAP connections, great. So the point of this is be aware of the columns, turn them on. You can then start filtering and looking at different logins, successful logins, failed logins, you name it. The other really powerful thing here is I can now export this data into just a CSV file. This download option here allows me to download 250,000 records based on the filter criteria that I just applied to these logs. Okay. And so that I can pull it out into a Excel file, slice and dice it, filter it, do whatever you want, put it in Power BI, et cetera, et cetera. There also is integration to export this data to a location that stores it longer than 30 days. So by default, well, you can't change this. You can't get any more than 30 days worth of data in the portal here for sign-in logs. If you need to collect sign-in data longer than that, we need to talk, because we need to get that data exported into another repository. You can put it into Log Analytics of Azure. You can put it into an Azure storage account. You can dump it out to a third-party SIEM system. There's options available to you there, right? So that's a quick update on how to see what's going on with your logins, how to add those columns, and the value that you can get out of figuring out what kind of apps are being used to log in, and if they're successful, if they passed MFA or not, all that kind of stuff. So let me know if you have any questions there, and I'll pass it over to our PowerApps group.
All right. So we're going to talk PowerApps for a couple minutes. If you have not heard of PowerApps, this is a cool thing. Imagine giving the ability to make applications to your tech savvy, but maybe not software developer team members or employees. This is the right place to do that. You literally have the ability to make apps in hours, not months. This is like a line off of Microsoft's page, but this is not an exaggeration. You can start making a working product very, very quickly. And you get to use Excel-like expressions to add your logic and run these PowerApps on the web, on the iPhone, on Android devices. Really slick. One of the templates that are available right off the shelf, and there are many of them, is this next slide here. This is an expense report managing app you could run on your phone. You add report title, who your approvers are, and you can customize any part of this, but this is literally how it comes off of the shelf to the person who wants to use it. So as you create a new expense report, then you can add new line items to it, and at the end, you can submit that expense report, see what's pending, approvals, what have been approved, and get a view of all of them all at the same time. This Power App, again, was pulled right off the shelf and was available to be used pretty much immediately after you made almost no modifications. And there are lots more of these as well. We've just finished, we're working on one internally where we can track our time entries, and it connects right up to Dynamics 365 and submits those time entries in PSA. It's pretty slick. And we built it in about 20 hours total. So what would have taken significantly longer, didn't. It was really cool. If you haven't heard of Flow, Flow is a workflow automation tool that Microsoft has built. Imagine a drag and drop sort of experience with a whole bunch of options that you can that will help you automate tasks in your environment. Again, literally hundreds of connectors. You can connect to popular apps. There are even buttons, physical buttons you can put on your desk that you can click to execute a flow to do all sorts of different things. It's pretty much endless. Two examples of flows are these two quick flows you could enable. So the first one, to save Office 365 email attachments to OneDrive. Every time you get an email in Office 365 Outlook, or you could even change this to Outlook.com if you're using that, would by default just grab that and save it to a folder so that you always have in OneDrive a folder containing all of your Office 365 attachments. I have to say though, these are probably two of the most simple flows you can make. Like, they have a beginning point, we get an email with a attachment, and the end point is right after that where you deposit that attachment in OneDrive. You can make some incredibly complex flows that can help you automate parts of your business. And another one of these, again, simple ones would be to start an approval when a new item is added in SharePoint. It would send an email off, get an approval from that person. Again, these are both off the shelf, super simple, but can really help automate some of the work that you do with day-to-day. Flow is a great option for updating items, creating items, and a heck of a lot more. So if you haven't heard about Flow, we should talk. Same with PowerApps and Power BI. Those three are all part of the Power Platform, as Microsoft calls it. You can turn your insights into actions when you're combining these different things. PowerApps and Power BI and Microsoft Flow all talk to each other. So if you've got a dashboard that tells you when your inventory runs low, you could then kick off a flow to submit that order to somebody. You could even then display a Power BI tile inside a PowerApps. You can see your inventory gauge inside an app where you could then place the order, and then a flow could send that order off. These three working together can make some pretty incredible applications to help drive your business really quickly. And the best part about all these three tools are that they're very user-friendly. You don't have to have a computer science degree in order to make a Power App or a Flow or Power BI dashboard or a report. Because of those, that's Microsoft's intended goal here too, is to take it from the IT world and to help the common people, as it were, make a big difference in their organization really quickly. So that is the Power Platform. I'll turn it back to Dave to finish us off.
Well, thank you. That was a fire hose of information. I appreciate everybody that participated today. We really set this up in this format because we wanted to touch each one of our departments and just let you know of tips and tricks, what's coming up in the future. And so a couple of takeaways. I ask that you take one or two ideas from what we presented today and write it down and see if there's ways that we can help you achieve more in your different organizations. So we appreciate you attending. We plan to do this on a regular basis just to give you a little bit of an insider update on everything that's happened. So yeah, we are a Microsoft Gold partner. We're an Okta partner. We try to keep you up. Like, for example, last week we had the Microsoft Spring update, and there's a lot of great ideas that are coming out of this. So we want to make sure that you're setting up your technology posture in the way that the organizations are suggesting we set it up. So the next step, go ahead and take a survey. As soon as you close this, there will be a survey that will give you the option. Also, that survey will be sent out to you electronically by email. Please take a second to fill it out, and we look forward to talking to you in the future and doing a deeper dive in one of the multiple areas or whatever area you'd like to discuss. Thank you.